Now that you've differentiated between accommodations and modifications, I want to talk a little bit more specifically about curriculum modifications. This corresponds to your Blackboard Supplemental Reading, Chapter 5, Curriculum Modifications. And this chapter is specifically really referencing what are the types of things you can do throughout your day, your ongoing classroom activity, in order to facilitate, again, the most beneficial access and participation that they can have in those activities and routines. These particular types of modifications, when we're talking about curriculum, it extends again across your whole day. So when you're thinking about planning for transitions, that is part of your curriculum. And it's really about being intentional. This might even go in your day's lesson plan. What am I doing for each of my transitions? Am I using a song? Am I using a particular visual support? Are there particular children that I am giving additional warnings or support to? So curriculum kind of transcends beyond just what you traditionally think of as curriculum, such as I'm using a Houghton Mifflin reading curriculum. Okay, so this is a greater sense of throughout your day's activity and routines. So I'm going to give some examples for each of these. There are 8 particular curriculum modifications that this chapter talks about. So for the first one, environmental support. The strategies listed here talk about changes in physical environment, social environment, or temporal environment. So an example might be, I have a picture of a tray. So think about a child maybe having difficulty keeping his or her hands to himself during an individual activity. You might provide more of a structured workspace. So it might be a tray or a box lid or a placemat. So it's an environmental support that's still allowing that child to participate in that activity. An example of a materials adaptation. For example, you might make materials larger or brighter to attract a child's attention or interest. So for example, a storybook. If there's a child that shows little interest in storybook time during large group, maybe you're using a large big book or one with large illustrations or something that has that is in toward their interests, or that's bold. Something that is going to attract their particular attention. Okay. Another example, let's see, of activity simplification. So there are a lot of different ways that you might simplify an activity, such as breaking down the task into smaller, more manageable parts. So here you see I have an example of the steps for washing your hands. So for some children, they may be able to do all these steps independently by following along. Others might require kind of the addition of adult support as a modification. So maybe the adult is doing some hand over hand or modeling or guiding each of those steps to increase independence. Okay. And next one, example of child preferences. There are so many different ways to incorporate a child's preference into the day, thinking about if they have a favorite quiet toy activity or a favorite way. The picture I put up here are bubbles. If a child loves bubbles, maybe you're utilizing bubbles to help them transition to circle time or transition to another large group or non-preferred activity. And again, it's being intentional about having this plan ahead of time, not as a quick response. And it helps make the ease of the day a little easier and also smoother if you have these planned ahead of time. Another example for child preferences is, of course, incorporating their a favorite person also into a specific area or activity. So maybe if a child has difficulty returning to the classroom after outdoor playtime, have the child's favorite person. Maybe tell the child when outdoor playtime is over. This might be another child, which kind of corresponds to that peer support. Special equipment is another type of curriculum modification. Sometimes this one is confused with materials adaptations, but it's really specific special equipment or adaptive devices that allow a child to participate or increase their level of participation. Sometimes these can be homemade equipment or devices, and then many are also made more commercially available, like therapeutic equipment. So an example as a cube chair, a child who needs some more boundaries or has a harder time concentrating during circle time might use a beanbag or cube chair that's in maybe its lowest position, so they're really still participating within that group expectation. Adult support. There are a lot of different ways. Certainly we can use adult support. Providing a model as a way to play or expand upon a child's play or other behavior. The picture here is hand holding. If you anticipate or know that there's a particular time of day that's more difficult, or if a child, let's say, is apt to run in the hallway when it's time for lining up to go on their way out the playground or to the bathroom, you are just being intentional about what level of support does that child need to be successful in that particular activity or time of day. So you might position yourself near the child, anticipate their behavior if they like to run out of line, and ask the child to hold your hand or ask the child a question. So you're providing that adult support kind of as a preventative piece to a behavior that you might anticipate occurring. Invisible support. Oh, actually, I forgot one. There's peer support, not labeled on here. So again, a lot of ways we can use our peers, and especially if we're in inclusive classrooms, because then we have typically developing children as well. Certainly having classmates model participation. So if a child doesn't know how to select an activity, you might pair another child who knows how, for instance, if they're using a computer. Or if a child is learning how to request food by signing during snack time, you might pair that child, make sure they're sitting next to the child who does know how to sign, so they're having that peer observation. You might pair the child with another for specific helper. So maybe they have a cleanup helper. I have a child right now that's part of his intervention plan is he has a cleanup helper, and he gets really excited knowing that this other child who's one he likes to be around and play with is his peer cleanup helper. So they always are buddies for cleanup time. And often that peer support increases that motivation much more than the adults. Again, depending on the child's kind of underlying motivation. If they're seeking that peer interaction, that can be a very useful support. And the last one is invisible supports. These ones can be a little bit more challenging to understand or use. This is things like sequencing turns to increase the likelihood of a child's participation. So maybe if a child is more reluctant to talk during group activities, giving that child a turn to talk right after maybe their best friend or a buddy who's particularly likely to be more talkative. It might give the child ideas of what to say, kind of as a model. You might sequence activities within a particular routine. So for example, I put the picture of circle time here. If a child is needing more practice staying within the group, you might do some invisible support such as alternating activities. Maybe you're doing songs with motion, and then alternating that with more passive activities such as listening to a story. And then you do another activity that's a little bit more engaging. You know, if the child likes movement, you're doing some movement. So you're again intentionally embedding this invisible support to extend the child's ability to sit during circle time. So there are a lot of different ways in which we can modify our curriculum in order to meet those needs and increase the child's participation. I'm going to put on Blackboard another link that gives you a lot of different examples of other curriculum modifications to use.